The Hunger, 1983, is an erotic horror drama based on the novel of the same name written by Whitley Strieber. The film was directed by Tony Scott, an English filmmaker. It tells the story of a vampire whose immortality turns into a curse. She cannot die even if she wants to, and is forced to relive the pain of loneliness and the grief of losing her lovers over and over again. The story revolves around two main characters. The first is Miriam Blaylock, played by Catherine Deneuve, and the second is Sarah Roberts, played by Susan Sarandon. Miriam Blaylock is a vampire whose existence on this earth dates back to a time before human history was even written. She has witnessed the age of Egypt's so-called gods. She has seen empires rise and fall, and deities come and go, yet Miriam Blaylock's existence has remained unbroken. She is immortal, and she is powerful. Within her lies the ability to turn others into vampires like herself. She can grant immortality to anyone she chooses, but along with that immortality comes a terrible curse. Those whom Miriam makes immortal do indeed live forever, but unlike her, they do not stay eternally young. After a certain time, they begin to age rapidly. Yet even as their bodies decay, they cannot die. They grow weak and powerless, their skin shrivels, and they turn into living corpses. That is the curse of becoming a vampire, condemned to lie in their coffins for eternity, waiting in vain for death to finally take them in its embrace. About 300 years ago, Miriam fell in love with a man from France named John Blaylock, and back then she bit him, turning him into a vampire like herself. Now, this vampire couple lives in New York City, blending in with ordinary people by teaching music to children. They're not like the usual kind of vampires people imagine. No one ever suspects them because they can move around freely, even in broad daylight. The sun's ultraviolet rays have no effect on them. The only thing they must do to maintain their strength is hunt once a week. And in a city like New York, there's no shortage of people who disappear without anyone noticing. People whose existence or absence makes no difference to anyone. That's why these vampires never have to think too hard about their prey. Life for the vampire couple in New York is absolutely perfect. They have everything they need and live a normal life disguised as music teachers. But one day, their perfect life begins to fall apart when Miriam's lover, John Blaylock, starts showing the first signs of aging. He realizes it when a young girl who comes to their house for music lessons takes his picture with a Polaroid camera. When John looks at the photo, he notices wrinkles forming under his eyes. The speed at which he's aging is not normal. He's growing old at a terrifying rate. For John, hours feel like years, as if every single hour equals decades. It's not that John didn't know this day would come. He always knew that even though he was immortal like Miriam, he wouldn't remain eternally young as she does. John was well aware of what his fate would be. So when he sees the first signs of aging, he goes to meet Dr. Sarah Roberts, a renowned gerontologist in the city. Gerontologists are doctors who specialize in studying the aging process of human cells. Sarah Roberts, too, is working on a similar project, researching ways to discover the secret to eternal youth. They have discovered a disease that causes monkeys to age rapidly, compressing their entire lifespan into just a few hours. Dr. Sarah Roberts is determined to find a way to reverse the effects of this disease. She has even written a book about how human aging could potentially be controlled or slowed down. When John Blaylock goes to meet Dr. Sarah Roberts, he tells her that just yesterday he was a 30-year-old young man, but today he has grown old. However, Dr. Sarah has never seen any such condition in humans before, so she finds it hard to believe his story. She's busy and doesn't want to waste her time talking to him, so she tells John to wait for 15 minutes, saying she'll see him afterward, and asks him to sit in the waiting room. Hours pass, and John keeps waiting, but Dr. Sarah never comes. Sitting there, he grows even older, his body continuing to age rapidly. When he realizes that Sarah isn't coming to meet him and that she's only wasting his time, he decides to leave the hospital. Just as he's leaving, he suddenly runs into Dr. Sarah. John is furious and tells her that he waited for her like a fool while she couldn't care less about his problem. Seeing John, Dr. Sarah is stunned. He looks far older than before. When she first met him, he wasn't this aged. It seems as though decades have passed for him in those few hours he spent waiting. Sarah tries to stop him so she can examine him, but John doesn't stay. John returned home, feeling extremely weak, so when a girl named Alice Cavender, who used to come there to learn music, arrived, he killed her and drank her blood. But even after doing that, it had no effect on his health. His youth and strength were never going to return. He was now destined for eternal suffering. Later, John begged Miriam to kill him and free him from all his pain, but Miriam couldn't do it. Hurting him in any way would only increase his suffering, not end it. John had grown so old and weak that he could no longer even stand on his feet. Then, with great sorrow, Miriam took him to the attic of the building, where there were already several coffins containing the bodies of many vampires, men who had once been Miriam's lovers. In one of those coffins, Miriam locked John away as well. Now he would spend the rest of his life decaying there. In the coffin beside him were other vampires, still alive, whose bodies had dried up and turned into mummies, but they weren't dead. Even now, they still call out Miriam's name, begging her to free them. The next morning, Sarah Roberts arrived there, searching for John. She wanted to meet him. Yesterday, she hadn't believed his words. Miriam told her that her husband had gone to Switzerland. Before leaving, Sarah gave Miriam her phone number so that whenever her husband returned, she could call and let her know. After Sarah left, a police officer arrived there, searching for the missing Alice Cavender. Alice's parents had filed a missing persons report, but the police officer found nothing there, so he left. The next day, when Sarah was at her office, she felt as though the telephone next to her was ringing. She picked up the receiver, but there was no response from the other side. Then a fellow doctor told Sarah that the telephone hadn't rung at all. A little while later, Sarah again felt as though the phone was ringing. She picked it up and began talking. On the other end was Miriam, who wanted to meet her. This time too, the phone hadn't actually rung, and there was no one on the line. In reality, Miriam had spoken to Sarah through telepathy. She could directly project her thoughts into Sarah's mind. Vampires don't need telephones to communicate. They can plant their words directly into the minds of their prey. The truth is, Miriam knows that whoever she chooses as her lover eventually grows old, even if she turns them into a vampire. She can't give them the power to remain forever young like herself. So after one companion is gone, she chooses another. She knew that John's time was over, that sooner or later he would grow old, and so she had chosen Alice Cavender, the girl she used to teach music to, as John's replacement. In time, she would have turned Alice into a vampire as well, but John killed her in the hope that by drinking her blood, his youth would return once more. Miriam is lonely and heartbroken, so she chooses Dr. Sarah Roberts as her new partner. When Sarah visits Miriam's mansion again, she soon finds herself drawn deeply into Miriam's affection, and the two become physically intimate. While they are being intimate, Miriam bites Sarah and lets her own blood flow into Sarah's veins. That same evening, when Sarah goes out to dinner with her husband, she seems distant and distracted. Around her neck is a pendant. When Tom asks her about it, Sarah tells him that it was given to her by a new friend named Miriam Blaylock, whom she met earlier that very day. She had spent 3.5 hours at her house. Tom finds it strange that Sarah met Miriam for the first time today and already spent such a long time with her, and even more surprising that Miriam gave her a pendant as a gift on their very first meeting. After dinner, when they return home, Sarah begins to feel unwell that night. She starts vomiting and feels restless. The next day, when they test Sarah's blood in the lab, her colleague tells her that there's some kind of infection in it, though they can't yet determine what it is. Sarah suspects she knows where the infection came from, so she goes back to Miriam's mansion. There, Miriam explains that she has made Sarah immortal and that she, too, will now become a vampire, just like her. At first, Sarah doesn't believe her. All of it sounds absurd to her. But slowly, her craving for blood begins to grow stronger, and she can no longer control herself. Then Miriam brings her a victim, someone through whom she plans to teach Sarah how to hunt a human. Miriam is about to kill the man and share his blood with Sarah, but before she can, Sarah's husband Tom arrives at the mansion, searching for her. Miriam sends him into the room where Sarah is struggling against her thirst for blood. She's in terrible condition, and when Tom sees her like that, he tries to help her. He's come to take her home, but he has no idea what's happened to her. Sarah keeps telling him to leave, but Tom refuses to go without her. Finally, Sarah loses control. She attacks Tom and drinks his blood. In her desperate thirst, she kills her own husband, the man she loved. When her thirst for blood finally calms, Miriam tells her that she will gradually learn to embrace her new life and that she shouldn't worry so much. But Sarah doesn't want to live such a monstrous existence. So when Miriam kisses her, Sarah uses her pendant to cut her own throat, and the blood of the now transformed vampire Sarah flows into Miriam's mouth. Sarah slit her throat because she wanted to die, but vampires don't die that easily. Neither Miriam nor Sarah knew what happens when the blood of one vampire enters the body of another. When Sarah's infected blood entered Miriam's system, it took away her power to remain eternally young, and she suddenly began to age rapidly. As Miriam grew weaker, her former lovers, those who had been locked away in coffins, began to rise from them, and one by one, they turned to dust before her eyes. They were finally freed from their eternal suffering. Their souls had been trapped by Miriam's affection, but now they were released, for Miriam's allure had come to an end. Sarah then sealed Miriam's withered body inside one of those coffins, the same way Miriam had once sealed her lovers. Miriam kept calling out Sarah's name, just as her lovers had once called out hers. Sarah took Miriam's coffin with her and moved to another city, where no one knew her. And now, in Miriam's place, Sarah has taken over. And with that, the story comes to an end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.